Okay, it's 5 p.m. on Monday, January the 3rd, 2022. This is the Policy Committee meeting for the Belton Independent School Board of Trustees. A quorum is not present. Heidi, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
We do not.
No public comment, so we'll move on to the agenda. Matt, take it away.
Wonderful. Trustees, thanks for being here today and diving into policy items with us. We have really two topics to talk to you about today: transfers and board member elections and elections in a school district. And I'm going to invite Cynthia Bodie up. Cynthia is going to talk to us about the first two policies, FDA local and FDB local. She works in Mike's department as our Director of Student Services. So Cynthia, come on up.
Thank you. So, Mike, wishes he could be here, but he wanted me to take y'all back to 2019 briefly, in which there was a total overhaul of the transfer policies in order to make them more specific and more concrete guidelines. And so now, we're going to be adopting a new district of innovation plan, and we wanted to make sure that our two board policies, specifically around revocations within those policies, matches the language in the DOI plan. And so, and also adding an exception for seniors, and we'll get to that just briefly. So if you have the policy in front of you, this policy was sent to TASB, in which Eric Narcisse took a look at it and provided guidance and language. And so you'll see the green section on the first page. That whole section has remained the same except for changing of the word district to superintendent and changing of the word reserves to may. But all the 6 items under that have not changed a bit. The main change here is that it's moved from, if you go to the next page, it used to be under the section called district employees. And so it didn't really make sense. It kind of seemed like it only applied to district employees. And so upon a guidance from TASB, they said, let's move it under criteria under the first page. And so that's really the only change as far as the revocation piece. We've always had that component there, just changing a few little words and moving the location of it. Then on the second page, it's really page 3, under campus assignment, you'll see in blue the word exception. And so currently we have our inter districts, which are our kids that want in from outside the district. They're actually assigned to campus based on where their home is located and the proximity of the closest school in Belton ISD. This exception is for our seniors, and so what this says is if we have a senior who's out of the district and he or she has been at a high school, let's say Belton High School for 3 years, the language they propose is 6 semesters. If they've been approved inter-district transfer for 6 semesters and all of a sudden they move to, say, Lake Belton High School zone, we should let them finish their senior year at Belton High School campus. And that's an addition to that, the exception, because next year we'll have 2 full comprehensive high schools with graduating class at Lake Belton High School. And so that exception would allow kids who move to be able to graduate at their campus. They've been there for 3 years. Okay. And then the same, if we move to page 7, the same general change in information. FDB refers to intra-district transfers. And so that revocation component was already there. And so it's basically just changing the superintendent may revoke inter-district transfers. And then the language under campus high school assignment is also the same language used in the exception for seniors. This would apply for seniors as intra-district transfers within the district. Same thing, same example. If they had been at Belton High School for 3 years as intra-district transfers, they can then stay there for their senior year. So just anticipating maybe some possibilities with that. And that's basically it as far as the transfer, the proposed revisions.
Okay. I have a couple of questions came to mind. First, with the District of Innovation Plan, how do these two mix together? I mean, I didn't even think about that before, so how do they mix together?
And so one of the things that was brought to our attention a little over a year ago now, it was over the summertime, is students that were coming from outside of our school district. So another school district that had been on a transfer from another school district.
An inter, so we're inter-district.
Yes.
Between districts.
If they engaged in some kind of activity that was illegal activity of major concern and stuff, we wanted to make sure we had in policy the ability to revoke that, which we didn't have that. And that's where that language came in is typically based on your policy that informs your district of innovation plan. So when it comes to transfers and stuff, those are two things that are covered in both policy and district of innovation plan. Our language didn't match up, and so we're amending that at this time, just saying that we reserve the right, basically, no matter what, if a kid misbehaves and causes problems and they're from outside of our school district, we have the ability to revoke their transfer, not the.
Okay, so kid comes from an outside district, moves in August, and then gets in trouble in November,
Yeah.
then you have the authority to revoke that.
Yes.
So kid's out.
Absolutely. Even if that is legal issues in another area and stuff like that, if it's a violent crime, if it's anything like that, we then have the ability to do that. And so this language in the policy and language in forthcoming District of Innovation Plan will align so that we have the ability to do that.
So that effectively kicks the kid out of the district.
That's right.
Now, that would not apply for an intra-district.
That's right, because the student lives within our school district boundaries and we would have to proceed from there.
Okay. Going to revocation, if you look at that within that, the district, or the superintendent, and by the way, I think this clarifies it, it's much better, actually. The superintendent may revoke an inter-district transfer for the following reasons. So should we say for one or more of the following reasons?
Yeah. I
Or
think that
it's
could
all,
add-
it says or, so it can be any of these,
Right,
but it can be one or more, right?
Yep.
Okay.
it could be one,
Now-
absolutely.
If you have someone that, that comes here, the space unavailability, that, when I looked at that, I thought, well, if you've got a kid that comes here and let's say comes in August and then in January, you got some other kids that move in, so we can actually revoke a kid's transfer, couldn't we?
We could. Now, I don't think we would, but I think that
Right.
does give us the ability to, and I think one of the concerns we have in the fast growth school district is we have to realize that some of these policies and practices that we have done for a long time may be of concern as we start growing faster and faster as a school district.
Okay.
So I think that's why that was in.
Now, what's an exigent circumstance for you? I mean, can you give us an example of what?
So in this case, we're on.
It's very subjective. I mean, it obviously, I mean, to me, to some extent, it's subjective.
Yeah, and I think it would. I gotta be kind of careful of that because I have to think through context. I don't wanna speak out of turn on some of these things, especially regarding space unavailability,
Yeah.
because that's a real tricky one. I don't see us using that, but I also don't necessarily think that it shouldn't be in there. I would say this, if we got to a point, let's use one of our fastest growing elementary schools. And if we got to the point where we had a large number of students enroll during the winter break, and we couldn't serve additional students, that's where that space unavailability.
That could be an exigent circumstance also.
Absolutely.
It could be both.
And so that's the part that I'm trying to dance around that a little bit because I think really depends on context, and I really don't see us using it specifically for space unavailability, but I do think having it there in a fast growth school district makes sense.
Right, that makes sense too. So, possible, but but very unlikely,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
I didn't see anything else in there that I thought was of any concern to me. Janet, you and Chris, anything?
I'd say in other circumstances, just as examples, if we had damage to buildings, things like that, that might cause limited space, there might be some issues there. Trying to think of any of those other unforeseen things that were just, there's an unforeseen kind of situation for us, I think, so.
Yeah, and that's one consideration, because we've got these six items here. Do you think that we should add something that you still have discretion?
I think, personally,
These
I
are
think
just six
these-
examples, but
Yeah, but I think,
I mean, to me, I want you to have the authority to do that, because there may be something here, something could come up that is not necessarily enumerated here, where you may need to utilize that authority for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't think that would hurt. I think we'd have to take a look at our policy, what our policy consultants and what Holly might recommend on that. But obviously, flexibility is appreciated.
I think, I don't want you to be, I don't want to handcuff you, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. No, the goal of this was to be able to be really explicit that there are certain reasons that we can revoke that. Can you think anything, any reason why we wouldn't put an additional thing in there that says other circumstances?
I can't think of anything, and
Okay.
just reemphasizing what you said, we haven't had to use the space unavailability, because we look at that ahead of time when we close campuses, and so then we
Right.
shift them to other.
But I think with the fast growth thing, I think
Yeah, that might
that's
come up.
that's a good rationale
Yeah.
for having that in there. Oh, why don't we do this? Why don't you consult with Holly, and if
We can
she
check
thinks
that.
there's something else, in terms of a second reading, I don't think we need to bring this back to us. I think we could, if there's something you believe is, if she thinks it's appropriate,
Yeah,
okay, then,
then we'll put
yeah,
something
we'll
in
put it
the
in
doc.
there.
I mean, this is pretty broad.
It is pretty
right?
broad. It is.
Just look at number one, right? A violation of the standard contained in the student code. of
Yeah, it
conduct
is broad, it
in the
is.
student handbook. That's huge, right?
It is
I mean,
huge,
that's
yeah.
the breadth of that. And so, the flip side of this is you do want to put some boundaries on it, because we also do have a responsibility to the kids in our district at this point.
Right.
There does need to be some expectation of continuity unless one of these things is,
Right.
right?
I'll ask, I will check with Holly on that about any kind of like number 7 that we may add and see if it's.
Yeah, if she thinks so,
I
fine.
think
If not, Chris makes a good point.
Yeah. I will also check with her on that, new up there about under revocation,
Yeah,
it says 1 or more.
And just to add a little more what Chris said, if I'm on the other side and I'm transferring in here from, I don't know, Rogers, okay? I wanna be able to look at that and say, how can I be?
The rules of the game, right?
Yeah, what are the boundaries here, and if I do everything right and not do one of these 6, then I get to stay,
That's right.
okay?
My kid follows the rules,
Yeah.
goes to school,
Right,
and, provided accurate information, they're gonna be able to stay.
yeah, well, that's a good point, very good point. You gotta look at both sides of the fence. But at the same time, we are talking about, someone coming from the outside, and obviously our first obligation is, to all students, but the first obligation is to students that are within our district, within our boundaries. Anything about the intra transfer policy? Janet, anything from you on that?
The only thing, I'm not sure if I saw this in here. In the past, middle school students, like if we built a new middle school in a child's 8th grade year, but they've been in this one would we then, in the past, we've let them stay,
Mhm.
especially on the middle school level, we have let them continue on and finish, if they only have like 1 more year to go. Is that?
We do,
Okay.
if they've been at that school for 2 years, but we say, now you're gonna need to attend the school, and the high school in which you're
Right.
zoned. So, sometimes they opt to say, oh, okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and go on, and they meet the kids that are gonna follow me to high school.
think,
But we don't necessarily have that written down. That's just something
Yeah.
we've just done as a kindness,
Yes,
as a
and we
courtesy.
do the same for elementary. If they've been there 4 years, they can stay there 5th year. It's just a courtesy.
Mhm.
I don't think we put that into writing yet, that's what I was just trying to think, what, I got
Because there could be
cobwebs on the
situations
brain.
where we can't allow that
That's right,
for whatever reason. So I don't know if we should include, you know,
I think that's why we have that separate transfer policy,
Mm-hmm.
right, not board policy, but we have a separate,
Transfer, I think it's called transfer guidelines.
Right. yeah.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot more covered in that than there is right here.
that's right,
Yeah.
it is the way it should be, right?
Right.
That's the administrative guidance for the policy that you
Those are
all have.
administrative regulations.
That's right.
Yeah.
When it comes to the opening of new schools, that's always a tricky one because you are definitely disrupting attendance boundaries in that opening of the new school. And so I think it would probably be wise to be a little careful of what to put into board policy regarding that because you don't know exactly how that might come out.
I do have one final question. If you look at the bottom, page 8, the last page, we're talking about district employees. I think the consensus, I believe, with most employees is that if they're an employee of the district, then they can have a kid go, come in here and transfer, okay? But that's not necessarily automatic because you have to meet the criteria, right?
Yeah, so you do have to meet criteria. I will say this, and Cynthia can probably add on to this a little bit more than I can in this case, because she's been dealing with it, but I think we've been very workable with any district staff that have come in. And so, yes, they've met the criteria, other than, that they're a district staff member coming in and bringing their kid. But I think we're pretty flexible with them usually.
Yeah, one thing we did struggle with a little bit this year was we had a window. And employees may not have applied during that window. And so 2 or 3 months later, we're having to question why they didn't apply back then. And so we need to do a better job this year of communicating to all BISD staff on this window. And if you're interested, go ahead and apply during this. We just communicated through social media and through previous applicants last year. This year, we're gonna put it out to everybody,
like in an email form maybe?
probably email. So that everybody knows when the window is and apply during this time.
And criteria continue to apply, irrespective of whether it's employee or not an employee, right? Yeah. I don't have any additional questions about it.
So we will do some due diligence with Holly and check on those couple of things, and then unless we contact you, we'll plan on bringing this to the whole board for a second reading at the upcoming board. Does that work?
That'll work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
You're welcome.
All right, these next two, there is nothing that we are changing in these policies. This is for discussion with the policy committee. These two items are our legal and local policies regarding elections and joint elections in the ISD. I share those with you, and you also have an extra that Connie uploaded to our board book earlier today, and we printed a copy for you here, and that is the election code on joint elections. We do have a decision to make as a school district on whether or not to hold a joint election with the county in May or not. It is my understanding that in the past, we have not done that, or at least in recent memory, we have not held joint elections with the county. Many school districts do that, including most of our surrounding school districts around here. And I do think that there are some potential benefits of it. I think there also are potential cons of it when you start thinking about the school district and what people are used to and how you get people out to the polls to vote. But we have to make a decision. We have contacted, Connie and Erica have contacted Bell County, and they are willing to run the election for us in May. We do have 3 board members up for election in May. We also, over the next month, are going to be talking with the entire board about the potential of a bond election or not. And so there is, with certainty, unless there's no opposition, there probably will be an election held in May. And there are going to be some election items held on the state level as well. So I wanted to bring that to you all and see if there's any consternation, any thoughts, any strong opinion that you all have regarding this topic, because I don't know a lot about it in the history of Belton ISD. I believe as I said, most of our local districts surrounding us do joint elections with the county. And we, I don't think, have in the past few years.
Why have we not?
I don't know that for a fact. That's kind of why I was bringing it to you all to see if there was reasoning behind it that we might know of. I think often, and when it comes to school district elections, it's nice to get our constituents in our schools for the elections. But other than that, I can't really answer that.
Would they be in the same location on the same ballot? Okay,
It
because
would
usually we always have people coming into admin first.
Yeah, so the drawbacks to it, from my understanding, are your people are voting in multiple locations. And so, example, you're voting for a school district election in the school district facility, same days, general election that might be taking place in another location. In the policies that you have in front of you and in the election code that I printed for you, it does say in there that you may hold joint elections. It doesn't say that you have to or you shall, but you may hold joint elections. It does say that they have to be on the same day and stuff like that. So I really wanted to feel it out with you. We have a February 1st deadline with the county to determine whether or not we're holding, or we're going to ask them to hold a joint election. If that happens, then we would pay them some fees to run the election for us and go forward from there, but we have to enter into that agreement with them by February 1st at the latest.
Is it a cost saver to do it with the county for us?
I don't know. Connie, do you have any input on that? I don't know that yet.
I honestly don't either. I honestly don't know.
It costs it either way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were about 7,000-8,000 last year, and that was just the one candidate race, right? Now you're talking a bond election, different scenario, different polling places, maybe a lot more workers. I don't know how that's paid out through the
So
county.
all of the local ones do this? Temple ISD?
My understanding is Temple ISD and Kalina ISD both do. I didn't check any others. I can tell you my previous districts, we always did in partner with counties.
Definitely did get increased turnout that way, right? I mean, as the most recent person to go through it, so the polling place for the school board election was at Pearl, and the polling place for the other election that was going on was at Tarver.
Yep.
And people would roll through the Pearl parking lot and want to know whether they could go vote for or against Temple College's bond. And as soon as I said, well, it's not here, this is a school board, why don't you go ahead and, let's talk about here, and then we'll send you over there. They're like, oh, no, I don't care about that. I want to go vote for that other thing. And they drive off. So, certainly there would be an impact on turnout. That's a good thing or a bad thing, depends on how you look at it.
So turnout being more so if we.
Yeah, you would expect higher turnout.
Logically, that's what I would think.
I mean, it's already gonna be
Yeah.
increased turnout just because of this bond election, like when Ty and I ran,
Yeah.
massive amounts of people.
Right.
But
Yeah.
this would be additional.
And there are some things that, it's my understanding will be on the ballot statewide, and that is property tax, things to be voted on, et cetera. So I imagine we are going to see a large turnout for a statewide election coming up here in the spring.
So my question is really about the polling places, right? Because being able to put the polling place where the people are, right? Like we're in a little bit more control of that if we keep it ourselves and we're kind of at the mercy of the county. I don't know what polling places the county would use, but the easier we make it, the better, especially in some of our communities, right?
I mean, the turnout's gonna be more, I just know it is.
Yeah.
Just to have more people
Is
voting.
that, what's the feeling on how it affects bonds for school districts?
Yeah, I'd say the majority of the bonds that we know are all were, done in joint elections in, I can think of the districts that we've looked at, and most of them are all done in joint elections, so you see the turnout there, and I think that's why you see the turnout, it has been larger than what we have seen in the past. To Chris's point, our recent school board election turnout was very low compared to some other districts around, and I think some of that was because of theirs also was a polling place for other election items.
Like Chris says, good or bad, depending on how you look at it.
It was almost really bad.
Yeah.
And I think it's a tricky one. I do think there are some benefits of being able to say, this is a school district election, and being able to run our election and have people on our campuses for those elections. That being said, I imagine it will end up being cheaper when we contract with the county, because they're already paying people, they're already doing some things. I imagine we'll have to pay a share of it. I don't know if our share will be that much. We will find more and more about that coming up here. And I also imagine it would be easier on the voters, and I think that's something for us to keep in mind as well. I think we do want it to be easier on the voters, but I do think it comes with implications, and I don't want to go into it without thinking through this and discussing it with a board of trustees.
Understand.
So I think having a better understanding of cost, right, is important, and I think having an understanding of the polling places is also important, so.
Yeah, we can find out more info on both of those. What other information would be helpful for you all as you consider something like this?
I've got some thoughts, but, I don't know, can you give me some thought and get back with you on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to follow up whenever. Again, we have a deadline of February 1st.
And
And
so we won't have another, we won't meet again before
Yeah,
then.
well, I'll talk about it Monday. Well, no, not Monday. What did I mean?
The 24th,
Yeah, a few Mondays from now.
2 Mondays from now, 3 Mondays from
3
now.
Mondays.
Is it 3 Mondays?
That's been pushed, they pushed it because it not.
Yeah.
because we'll need to visit, you'll need to visit with the other board members as well. Since we're not making any changes to this other than consideration as to whether we should do a joint election or
But
not.
presumably we'll have to vote on it, right? And so it'll have to be on the next meeting agenda.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think what we'll do is if you have additional questions, feel free to contact me, and we'll try and gather the right information. We'll communicate with you all. And, from an administrative point of view, if we feel like it's in our best interest to discuss with the whole board, we will talk to our board president and vice president and see if it is an agenda item for the upcoming meeting. I did, again, I would, if you get a minute, take a look through the policies and the election code. We see by looking at the policies and code, there's nothing that says that we have to, but it does give us the ability to do so. And I do know that most districts do so.
I mean, if you could find out, I'd like to know the rationale behind, folks behind us and why they did it that way. There's gotta be a reason,
That's.
Do a little
that's what I'm
history
curious
digging.
about.
unless it just happened that way.
Especially
and
it's so different from everybody else.
Yeah.
Sounds good. We'll work on that. That is all we had for this agenda.
Wow,
How about that?
29 minutes. All right, any issues, concerns for future administrative reports? Anything?
I do, well, it's related to one of these. So when we're looking at some of these local policies, I know we're also working on the policy review, right? So are we feeding these into that review process, or is that something we're gonna have to come back around after the review and look at again?
So with, for example, when Cynthia presented on FDA and FDB local, we worked with TASB and got their consultation on that. So TASB's the one that's handling our
So
policy.
presumably the review wouldn't come back with something different.
Presumably it wouldn't, but it might bring up a question and just say, there are a couple discrepancies in yours, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
But hopefully they won't be policies that we have to spend a ton of time on.
Right.
Unless you'd like to talk about EIC local again, and then we more than we could if you'd really like to. But no, I think for the most part, the ones that we have recently taken care of, we tried to run by TASB, and we should be in, there will be some discrepancies with what their model policy looks like and what we have adopted.
Right.
And my belief on that is, if the policy committee said it was good and our board voted and said it was good, then we don't need to spend time on it.
Sorry, no.
Okay. Then we stand adjourned.